Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to EAN601 week 7. This week we are going to be looking at teacher as researcher and reflective practitioner. So we have 11 participants here so far. Welcome everyone. Welcome to Zoomland, and also welcome to those of you who are listening to the recording at home. I hope you're all doing well. Please don't hesitate to join us though. It is nice to catch up and see everyone's lovely faces, and especially for this particular session we are looking very much at the assessment task. Okay, so we're going to be looking specifically tonight at reflective thinking. We're also going to be looking at critical thinking and the 4 R's. We will look at collaborative reflection, teacher as researcher and advocate. And I've also added in there some discussion about professional development as well. And then we're going to break down assessment task 2, and there will be the opportunity for you to ask some questions. So hopefully you received my email earlier on today and you've all had a look at the assessment task and have come with some questions for me. Okay. All right, so I guess to start with, it's important to remember that being a reflective practitioner is a critical part of being an effective teacher. So that will be early childhood, primary, secondary, and adult education at university as well. Being a reflective practitioner for me is the basis of my best practice. So reflecting is, as it says on the slide, it's the active, ongoing and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge. So that is the definition from Witten et al. 2004. So a great deal of your time throughout your master's, so in university and also in your professional teaching practice, is going to be spent thinking. So thinking about what people have said, what you've read, what you yourself are thinking, and how your thinking has changed over time and with those influences. So it's generally believed that the thinking process involves 2 aspects, so reflective thinking and also critical thinking. They're the 2 main aspects. Okay, so reflective thinking, it addresses practical problems and it's more immediate than critical thinking. So it's basically around posing questions to practical problems in our daily practice as teachers. So critical thinking, it is more deeper reflection, and it involves objectively, looking objectively at given situations. I think a lot of researchers would believe that it's a learned skill. What do you think? Those of you that are here this evening, would you agree that critical thinking is something that is learned? Do you think you need direct instruction to be a critical thinker, or do you think it's something that comes fairly natural to each of us? What do we think?
I think it is something that has to be learned, because critical thinking doesn't come very easily. We tend to go with what others say or what is being done. We accept without thinking much about it. So I think we are kind of used to accepting things and not reflecting on what we are doing, because we had been doing it for a long time. So I think critical thinking is kind of a skill that needs to be learned and then applied.
Excellent. Yeah, I would definitely agree that with that as well, because it really does require you to look and to think beyond what you already know. And I liked your point about, you know, as critical thinkers, we need to question what we're reading as well, and also the validity of research, of what we might read on the internet. It's really important that we're very critical of I guess, the validity of everything that we're reading, that we make sure that all of our research that we use is peer reviewed, that it's empirical research. So you really need to think about and apply lots of additional layers to develop rich questions and inquiry when it comes to critical thinking. So these additional layers, they can take the form of looking at different perspectives other than your own, looking at scholarly literature, research and theories that are relevant to your daily work, and also those considerations of the broader social and political influences that we've very much been talking about in the first term. So things like societal expectations, stereotypes, you know, the hidden curriculum that we discussed, and curriculum and policy changes that impact on our daily practices as well. So when thinking critically, you would to very much, you need to ask yourself questions like, what assumptions have been made? What is valued in any given situation? What is not valued? And we also need to think about power, like the relationships power. So who is made powerful and who is not made powerful in all of our critical thinking. Sorry, having a little bit of an issue with my mouse. Okay. All right, so Witten et al. Again, he considers that reflection consists of three basic elements. So a trigger, so this might involve a direct experience, something that you may have observed in your learning environment, or something that you read, such as key theorists or possibly recent empirical research. It could also be important that you consider that trigger. So in terms of your beliefs, in terms of your values and your knowledge. So how you question your own practice, how you feel about that actual trigger. And importantly, it will involve the contemplation of future practices and future understandings and knowledge that will often involve further professional development and ongoing learning. So it's about how you relate to wider issues, how you relate those wider issues to more local issues. So we talk about from macro to micro and vice versa. So I would very much recommend, as part of your research for your assessment task 2, that you have a look at Witten's research. So reflecting on an experience, it involves drawing on current understanding. So to think deeply and purposely about what can be learnt from the experience. So the purpose of academic or professional reflection is to transform our teaching practice. So whether it's the practice of learning or practices within your profession. So we talk about the 4 R's: reporting, relating, reasoning, and reconstructing. So involving learning from your experiences and connecting important theory with practice. So understanding that these 4 dimensions can help you to become more aware of assumptions and those preconceived ideas to help us to problem solve. So, and also to help you plan future actions. So research possibly, or decisions and possible goals around your professional development. Now I'm going to break down the 4 R's. And while I'm doing that, I want you to consider your assessment focus and the question that you formulated. I want you to think about that as we discuss the 4 R's. So reporting and responding, this involves what happened or what the issue or incident involved, why it's relevant, and making observations, expressing your own opinion, and asking questions. So this kind of reflection should be the basis of your teaching and interactions with colleagues, with parents, within your learning environment, and also the community, and I guess to a certain extent, children as well. So relating, this involves relating or making connections between the incident or the issue and your own skills, professional experience, or knowledge. So you might ask questions such as, have I seen this before? Were the conditions the same or different? And do I have the skills and knowledge to deal with this? So those 3 questions are fairly essential when it comes to making connections between the incident and your own skills and experience and knowledge. So 3 important questions to pose in your professional practice. So reasoning involves highlighting in detail all those significant factors that underlie the incident or issue. So really looking behind what that incident is. So explaining and showing why they're important, why it's important to have an understanding of the incident or the issue. So referring to relevant theory, of course, and literature to support this reasoning. As master's students, this is what you're doing on an ongoing basis. And of course, very importantly, considering different perspectives. So how would a knowledgeable person perceive this, and also what are the ethics involved? So this level of reflection involves a high level of abstract thinking. So where you're able to draw original conclusions and where you take a personal position based on the critical evidence. So very much what you have done in assessment task 1. So looking at that scholarly research, that empirical research, looking at the curriculum and pedagogy within the early childhood education and care, analysing it, and then coming to your own conclusions about the sorts of implications for professional practice. So for the profession, but also moving into assessment task 2 for you as an individual in your teaching practice. So reconstructing, reframing or reconstructing future practice or your understandings. So you would consider things like, how would I deal with this next time? What might work and why? What are some different options? So, looking at lots of different options that may be available to you, and posing questions like, what might happen if, or if I did this, what sort of outcome might there be? And again, reflecting on theory. Are my ideas supported by theory? And most importantly, the outcome. So can I make changes to benefit others from my new understandings? So you're going to be asking yourself these questions every time you evaluate your plans in your practice and your teaching strategies and approaches as well. So these are also questions that you would be posing in the development of your action plan in your second task as well, assessment task 2. So Bredesen 2002, one of our readings for this week, suggests that reflective practice is more likely to lead to change when it is undertaken collectively. So learning together with colleagues, it draws upon each other's diverse knowledge, experiences and views and attitudes of each individual within that group. So lots of different perspectives and understandings and knowledge. So it's a way as a group to experiment with new ideas, new ways of teaching and caring, and also very importantly, and especially I guess for me personally, I find that it helps to motivate you, and also it keeps that making a positive difference in children's learning and their outcomes front and centre. So as a group, as a whole. So I'd like to put it out to you individually. Currently, how you engage in reflective practice with your colleagues. I'd like some of you to share in your practice at the moment, whether it be as an early childhood teacher, possibly could be lower primary, upper primary, or even secondary, what kind of practices, what kind of reflective practices do you engage in?
This is Meg.
Thanks, Meg.
Hi, I actually am not working anywhere this year. I'm doing casual work, but I'll base it on my previous full-time employment last year, and that was in a kindergarten, and it was actually some new things that we did there. So obviously as the kindergarten team, we would have a weekly meeting where we would reflect, and then for our observations and how we spoke to parents, we would do a termly ebook. And within that ebook, we would get together and we would do a statement of intent. So based on what's happened the term before, we would reflect what we wanted the children to achieve goals-wise, and also how we would do that as a group, as a community. Mm-hmm. And then I would personally also think about different ways I was delivering that. So we looked into the things we wanted to look into, like loose parts, or each we tended to find something we wanted to look into some more and found theory about it. So we would do executive function one term, and then it was loose parts another, and it all sort of, it sounds very segmented, it's the way I'm saying it, but it actually was a very ongoing flow-on effect over the year.
So that was daily and weekly and then ongoing over the year. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Very good. Were there any challenges involved in, finding the time and the resources to commit to that kind of reflection?
There were challenges. Our director, she doesn't like the word director, the person in charge, was committed to it. So she actually would give us, she would work it that people could come off the floor. So it's a 32-place multi-aged service. So the way the kindy went, there was 3 of us that would leave the floor for half an hour, and we were covered. And then it was a big group, because all of the ones underneath, they called it like pods. So each member had particular children, and they all came together to talk about what they wanted to achieve, but it was not the same. Like, it wasn't the same experiences for each. So I think they had a bit of learning curve there to they were wanting the same goal, but then they took a while to get them to the point where they could deliver in their strengths and the group of children that they had.
Yeah.
And we also had monthly staff meetings, and they can be a bit tricky because, trying to pin it down. And
So
then
were you paid for the staff meetings, or was that something that you had to do in your own time?
we got paid.
That's good. Yeah.
But they turned into, one of the co-workers we had, she was from Italy, and she'd done, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a pedagogy. She'd done a master's in pedagogy. There's
Okay.
another word for it, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it right now. And they were, as a service, they were into Dan Siegel and attachment theory. So a lot of our things became showing us that theory, and then we would talk about that and how we could put it into our practice.
Excellent. So you're really very much what we were talking about before, that collaborative. Everyone comes to the table with different interests and expertise as well. And I guess it's important that we're open to sharing those perspectives. And it sounds like as a group, that was very much what
Definitely. I think when I first started there, I worked there for 2 years, the earlier comment about critical reflection being learnt, because the director there also had a bachelor in psychology. So when she did something, we were talking about it. And it depends where you've been, but other places, sometimes you're just told what you're doing and then you do it. Whereas she would say, how would that work and what would we do? And I actually left that first meeting with a headache, because she would put everything back with questions. Well, how would that work? And how would we? So, but it was a really good learning curve in the end. Yeah.
And it's very much based on, our ability to critically reflect, or even our want to critically reflect, comes from our background as well. And that's why in assessment item 2, we're actually asking you to reflect on your life history and your professional history, because everything about who you are influences moving forward as a teacher. So it's important that we reflect on our beliefs about learning. For example, some people, and it's cultural as well, may believe if someone tells me something, someone in authority, or possibly someone that is seen to be an expert, if they tell me something, then therefore it is correct. But of course, we need to think about our context. We need to think about the individual students. And I guess we need to think, is this person up to date with their understandings as well? New research is coming out all the time. So we need to constantly be questioning our practice and the practice and understandings of others as well. All very nicely, of course, and cooperatively. But
It was very nice. She would say to me, there's more in you, Meg. There's more in you to come, because I can be a bit shy, hence why when I'm talking, I'm a bit, but she's like, there's more in there. So anyway, she was good for that.
That's excellent. Anyone else? There are quite a few of us here now. Anyone else have something from within their professional practice, either past, present, or possibly future as well, that you'd like to share?
I'll share. So a big focus in our region at the moment on our annual implementation plans for all of our small schools is coaching and feedback cycle, and that's really important at the moment. And so the flavour of the month at one point last year, because they were finding that when they were sending leadership staff into the room to reflect and whatnot, it wasn't particularly effective. People were doing really designer lessons for the leadership to come and watch. So they started to buddy us up instead, and they'd give us release time to be able to go and watch a fellow teacher and then have a conversation before and after that as well. And so that was really good as a reflective technique to see what other teachers were doing and to pick up some ideas, but also to really have to justify yourself as to why you were doing things and think about whether or not there were better ways. I think sometimes when you're designing a lesson or you're teaching your day, things become a little bit automatic, and something works because it's tried and true, but you sort of lose sight of why that works and why you came to that in the first place. So it's good to have somebody else in your room and then have that conversation afterwards to have to justify that. But also for me as a prep to year 10 teacher, no matter who you buddy me with, I have their group of students at some point within the week. So it was good for me as well to be able to see the classroom teacher in action and how they work with those kids as well.
That's excellent, Jess. Yeah, very much. Some of those points were really important. So important I jotted them down, because these are strategies, they're approaches that some of you may want to actually include in your action plan. So observing other teachers, asking for feedback, giving feedback, coaching, possibly even mentoring as well in your learning environments, taking on prac students. It's a wonderful way to become motivated, to get new ideas as well. So all sorts of things that you might be thinking about that you might want to add to your action plan that you're going to be working on. Anyone else that wanted to share?
I'm happy to share, Angela.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned before that I work in a coaching and mentoring capacity, and obviously, you know, a huge component of both is encouraging reflective practice. Last year, I had 4 graduates, first year teachers, and, you know, in a mentoring capacity, obviously, you know, encouraging them to be reflective on, you know, not just their teaching performance, but even, you know, their well-being, and encouraging them to engage with things like ATSL have a My Induction app, and tracking their well-being and how they're feeling. Another huge component was encouraging them to watch others work. We had a bit of a template, I guess, that we developed where we kind of centered it around what they see, what they hear, and what they think. And that was always, so I met with them every week. We would have a one-on-one, and it was always really nice to frame it in that way, because, you know, what they saw was just a pure observation, and what they're hearing was, you know, pure observation. But then their thought process was, I think, where it started to bring out their reflective thoughts. And, well, I thought this, but then, you know, I put it in context of when I'm in the classroom, and, you know, that was purely where we would develop our goals from what they were able to witness and then reflect and put into context for themselves. And very, very similar in a coaching capacity too, you know, and we have a few tools in place where, you know, we give teachers, we call it our scale of proficiency in reading. So they mark themselves on a continuum that we've developed, and it's purely the only intent. It's not a performance tool. It purely is for their own personal development. And, you know, they can identify areas where they feel like they maybe would like to focus their development. And I work with them as a coach to reflect on where they currently are and where they would like to be, and how I can help them get there.
That's fantastic. That's really good. Any opportunities to coach, or especially to mentor beginning teachers or experienced teachers as well, to work together to share practices and support each other, I would be jumping at that. It really makes such a difference in your own professional practice to have those different perspectives and to give each other feedback, whether it be written or verbal, depending on your environment. But
Yeah,
these are all really fantastic ideas that some of you may like to consider for your action plan. We're going to talk about more a little bit later on. But I guess as part of this action plan, you need to be thinking about some of the challenges that you might have as well, in especially when it comes to engaging in critical and reflective practice in prior to school settings. Having the time, it can be a difficulty, and you really need to think out of the box to come up with new and innovative ways of doing it. And I think when it comes to reflection and critical reflection as well, I'm a big believer in involving parents. When I was directing in long day childcare centres, we developed what we called professional development groups. And this was not just with staff, but with parents as well. So it involved working together as a teaching and learning community to decide on where we move forward with pedagogical practices, how we met curriculum requirements, all sorts of things. So very important that when you are critically reflecting, that parents to a certain extent can become involved in that as well. Any ways that anyone this evening has managed to get parents involved in that reflection in your learning environments? It doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face. You may have actually done that in a written way, or using some sort of app or something. Has anyone any ideas?
We had one idea that worked for us quite well. We had a kindergarten parent information night, and my co-worker wanted to get the parents' opinion. So as we spoke, there were some questions for them and some post-it notes, and they could put them up. And out of those post-it notes, because this service is in Brisbane and is in a very multicultural area, they really wanted us to embrace, but even more embrace the special multicultural service that we had. So we'd been working towards it, but then our next statement of intent was around our diverse, sort of travelled more into our diverse cultures, and we researched that some more, and that was through parent suggestion that they wanted us to look at that.
Excellent, good, very good. Thank you very much, everyone, for sharing those points. Get us going.
I'm finding as well, Angela, at the moment, even though the world's gone crazy and we're all online, parent involvement at the moment is incredible, and the feedback and reflection you're getting from them. I swear in the past 3 days already, I've had more parent comments and feedback and involvement than I have in the past 5 years collectively. But it's really good actually for the parents to be involved in the kids' learning at the moment, and actually seeing what you're putting out there and how you're interacting with the kids, and actually being part of that as well. Even though you do get the frantic phone calls if something's not working and something's going wrong, most of it's actually really positive, and the parents are seeing a whole new side to what you're doing that they've never seen before.
I think as terrible as the current situation is, I think and also, all of the media take on internet issues and things like that, which has sort of been blown out of proportion to a certain extent. But I think that the opportunities to work with parents, with families, and to give them an opportunity to understand really where their children are with their learning, and your methods and approaches to teaching as well. It gives you the opportunity to share those in more depth with parents, so that, because now they're wanting to have a bit more of an understanding about how you actually teach their children, your students. So lots of opportunities for dialogue, and I'm very excited to hear, Jess, that this is something that you too have found is happening in your learning environment. That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
The country that I come from, which is Papua New Guinea, we didn't have more like an online sort of communication there. So what we would do, we had a communication book that every child had. So the previous school that I've come from, the book would go home every night and come back the next morning. So that was a good way of communicating with the parents and asking for their reflection on regarding the homework or the behavior, everything that required, for the child. We would always communicate through that. So that was a really good way of reflecting, and I think that's very effective.
Yeah. So lots of different ways. That's great to hear. Thank you. So I think, as very much noted in this week's readings, early childhood curriculum documents, they place a very strong emphasis on the importance of critically reflective practice. So this critical reflection can be focused on a long-term issue, perhaps, which may require ongoing research and lots of professional development to assist you, or it might involve something that's more spontaneous, so a specific problem or event or an interaction that needs to be discussed and evaluated on the spot, and possibly follow up with some reflection, research, or some ongoing learning in the future. But you know, ongoing professional development, it's vital in, well, not just early childhood environments, but primary, upper primary and secondary as well. It's essential. So it really, you know, is important that we get that understanding of current critical issues and research that's fundamental to early childhood education and care. And I cannot stress enough the importance of keeping up to date with recent research as well, because things are changing constantly, and it's very important that we keep our finger on the pulse and we see ourselves as ongoing learners. So it really is fundamental to best practice in early childhood education and care. So central to a teacher's strong professional self, so a strong professional identity, is the promotion of discussion and discourses that shape teacher professionalism. And in doing so, advocate for quality care and education for the individual child. So Fennick et al. 2010 proposed that this perspective extends thinking about professional practice to include things like activism based on collaborative action, critical reflection, and also equity and social justice issues as well. So really supporting young children's rights, so which was very much a part of the statement of intent that was developed by Early Childhood Australia in conjunction with the Australian Human Rights Commission, so 2015 to 2018. So it highlighted 5 key themes as a guide to how early childhood education and care professionals, how we can actively advocate for children's rights. So, you know, it's all about, again, critically reflecting on our practices and really advocating for that for children and the individual and as a whole school possibly as well. So to develop this culture of inquiry, to embed critical reflection into our daily practice, we need approaches such as those that are on the slide. So trust and collegiality, so that educators feel able and confident to talk about their concerns or their ideas or any challenges that they face. Respect for individual viewpoints and understandings. This is essential. So viewpoints, understanding, cultural understandings as well. Opportunities during our busy teaching and planning schedules for all educators to contribute to discussions. And this is something that takes commitment at both an individual level, but also at an organisational level. Because as we noted in our discussions before, things like staff meetings, there are issues with, you know, staff aren't going to be terribly happy about having to go in their own time to do staff meetings. There needs to be opportunities to meet without children being around, like pupil-free days, or some prior to school settings have incidences where they close up every 6 weeks, a couple of hours early, and staff get to meet together and to discuss. So parents are informed of that, and for those parents that need essential care, then some relief staff can be brought in. And of course, we have pupil-free days in primary school and in high schools as well, where teachers can actively get together. So there's that commitment to inquiry, to reflection about best practice. So of course, making that time for reflection and to develop skills and a range of approaches to reflective practice as well. So lots of different things, you know, some early childhood teachers are very much into journal writing, which can be a really important part of our professional practice when it comes to reflecting. Developing critical conversation groups, participating possibly in online forums, which is something that I think has become more and more popular at the moment. Anything else that, any other approaches or practices that you use to encourage reflection in your learning environments, or you personally? Any strategies that you're using or to assist you in ongoing learning? Anything that we're using at the moment? Another one, of course, is ongoing professional development, and this needs to be based on your professional goals as well. Something that I think is really important within early childhood, primary and secondary is engaging in any research opportunities. And this doesn't have to be big research. This can be research within your learning environment. If you do have a particular focus, something that you want to find out more information about, or collectively as a school you might be interested in, there's no reason why you can't, develop your own research as well. And another area that is really vital that we've already discussed before, and some of you have told me that you are members, becoming members of professional bodies. So for example, Early Childhood Australia, then you're able to receive latest research. You're able to get involved in action groups in specific area of interest. And of course, you then have the knowledge, the ability, the motivation to advocate for approaches or possibly changes in your learning environment as well. So it's all about getting involved. And as well, as we mentioned before, taking on prac students from universities, and also any mentoring and coaching opportunities as well. These need to be taken up because it's not just for the other students and staff, it's such a wonderful opportunity for you to develop your skills and share perspectives as well. So I know I mentioned this reading before, Bredesen, Designs for Learning, a New Architecture for Professional Development in Schools. This is one of the readings for this week. Did anyone get a chance to read this one? Yeah, a few people are nodding their heads. I would say that, it's from 2002, and I know I'm a stickler for recent research, but this I do believe is pivotal research in professional development. It's an oldie but a goodie, and I would actually say that it's seminal research in this area. So he advises that professional development needs to be strategically planned. So it needs to be planned based on goals. He also suggests that we need to rethink our perceptions of what professional development involves. So I guess to move away from the days where professional development was one-off isolated experiences that we might go to as a group, and then it wouldn't even be discussed or possibly would be forgotten. Has anyone been to professional development with their schools or their settings where this has been the case? I think more often than not, this, from my experience, this tends to be what happens. So we really need to make sure that professional development that we do attend, it's goal focused, so it's specifically for you based on an area of need or an area of interest. But it also needs to be, as I've got on this slide, and Bredesen advocates, it needs to be in work, at work, and beyond work. So part of facilitated conversations with colleagues, part of your reflective practice, and part of your ongoing learning. So in terms of professional development in your own teaching settings, what does it currently involve? So who actually has the opportunity to go out on professional development in their teaching environment? Anyone?
Angela, yeah, I can share with this one. And what you were talking about previously before. So I'm very fortunate to belong to a school that truly values the professional development of the staff, all staff, teachers, leaders. We have like a reading inquiry it's in its second year now. And we gather a lot of things, like I spoke about before, the scale of proficiency, where teachers are identifying they want to actually the need for development. And from that evolved sending myself and the other literacy coach along to, it was a metro region run initiative, leading learning. And we did a 3-day professional development at the Reading Centre. And it was around teaching reading in the Australian curriculum. And that was a set of 6 modules. And it was like a train the trainer. So we so we did the professional development, and now we're taking that back to our school and we're delivering the modules to the rest of the staff. And we do that in what we call a HIP session, which is Hubs Innovating on Pedagogy and Performance. So every week, every hub comes offline for 90 minutes, and it's purely to look at we do student profiles and look at how are the students going in our classes, and it's an opportunity for everybody to collaborate on offering some solutions or some ideas to try for those particular children. And it's where we have an opportunity to deliver professional development to the hubs relevant to their year levels. And currently, prior to school closures, we were rolling out those 6 modules for professional development for our staff.
Excellent. Well, hopefully that will still continue in the future.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose the incentive or the motivation to continue with that. That would be a terrible shame, because it sounds like you put a lot of effort into that. It sounds wonderful. That's a really good example. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else? One more example of currently what your strategies are for professional development in your settings. One more person?
I can talk, Angela.
Okay.
So ours is probably a little less structured. It's more of a school improvement agenda. So whatever's the school's working on, whether it's spelling or reading or writing, that's what the focus is for all the staff professional development. So when we were focusing on reading, we were seeing a lot of going to Louise Dempsey and Sheena Cameron PDs, where focus is on spelling. So we have a specialist who comes in to work with the staff on something called word inquiry, which is some staff find really interesting and some don't, but it's been a lot of training for 2 years now about how to use that in our spelling. In terms of our own goals, generally we have to organise that ourselves. So because I wanted to focus a bit more on inquiry in prep, I went to something on the weekend that I'd found out about. And so generally our PD is around the improvement agenda, and if there's something personally we want to work on, we organise that ourselves.
So this would be based on your professional development goals, so your evaluation and then goals that you put in place. Yeah. And so would this also be based around the Australian professional standards as well? Are you encouraged to make links to those in your professional development plans?
No, we have a fairly relaxed school, I'm going to say. We fill out the forms and don't really talk about it. So it's really led by us, our personal professional development, if it's not aligned with the improvement agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to be quite keen.
You have to. So there are teachers, I would imagine, that would slip through the gaps in that regard.
Yeah, well and truly.
Okay, well, that is a shame, and by the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like it's something that is a culture of inquiry. It's not something that you participate in and talk about and share. Am I right there?
Yeah, you're right. It's very much directed. This is what we're doing. Sometimes we're invited to share back in staff meetings, but yeah, it's very directed, and we certainly don't get a lot of reflection time. We have a plan for watching others work and having principals come into the room and give us feedback, but it's a plan as opposed to actually taking place. I think the last time I got time to do that was 2013. So, yeah.
And so I think from what you're saying, it very much depends on leadership in the school. So having plans in place but actually implementing them is another thing. I'm sure you'd all agree. So strong leadership is something that really is important when it comes to professional development and to possibilities for reflection in your learning environment as well, and for sharing those perspectives. So I think those of you who are in a school that does have leadership that encourages that and follows it through, you're very lucky. And for those of you that don't, maybe it's something that you can advocate for in the future.
Sure.
Because yeah, it's vital. It really is. Anyone else wanted to contribute to that discussion at all?
I'd like to share. I now feel like I'm in an even more amazing school than I realised.
Okay.
Our leadership team is fantastic on professional development. So we're the same in that the school have their improvement agenda. And so because we are remote, what will generally happen is the region pays for certain specialists to come out, and they might come out and spend a couple of days, but do all of the small schools in the region and do twilight PDs and stuff if it's linked to the whole school agenda. But then we also,
what do you mean by twilight PDs?
So things like reading. Our focus at the moment in the region is writing. So we've got a lot of specialists coming out. Some are independent companies that we're teed up with at the moment, and some are specialists coming out from Brisbane head office as well, from things like the Reading Centre and whatnot, to help out. So that's if it's targeted towards the school improvement. But at the start of the year, we also sit with the principal and identify, using the AITSL standards, 3 areas that we want to work on for the year. And so then we're given a $3,000 PD budget per person throughout the year. We can spend that as we choose to then go and source our own PD linked to those 3 goals. So out of that, like 3,000 sounds like a lot, but we live remotely. So we can either choose to pour that whole 3,000 into registration costs of different PDs if we want to do lots, or if we don't want to be out of pocket, we can also put that 3,000 into flights and accommodation and whatnot to access those PD as well. But like for me, I generally access it in Brisbane. I try to find things in Brisbane where I've got family anyway, so you can save more money up and get more PD done. But a huge amount of money is poured into it at our school, especially because we've got a lot of new teachers as well. We often have half our staff are graduates. So a lot of money is invested in that way.
Excellent. That's great. Thanks, Jess. So lots of different ways that you're approaching professional development in your school. So for some of you, it's something in terms of your action plan that you would concentrate as an individual, but I guess for others, it might be something professional development might be organised without you actually being able to choose what you want to do. So I guess in terms of your action plan, your professional development action plan, if it's not something that you are actually able to do, you could do it for something that you would like to do in, you know, an ideal situation. It's up to you if it's something, because the assessment task, and we're going to talk about this very soon, it's very much an authentic and meaningful task, and it's something that I really would like to see that you are able to do, that it can be part of your school professional development plan individually. So, you know, it is has been planned to be an authentic and meaningful assessment task. So starting with your critical essay and then moving on to the development of your action plan. Okay. So does everyone have a copy of their task sheet there in front of them? If you could grab it now, that would be good, because we're just going to go through. What I'll do is I'm going to go through the assessment task, part A and part B, and then we'll have opportunities for you to ask questions afterwards. So if you do have a copy of you in front of you, you might want to, as we go, if you want to jot down a few questions so you don't forget them. So the assessment task, it basically builds on your essay. As I said, it's designed to be authentic and meaningful, so for your actual professional practice, either now, if you are teaching, or in the future. So you can think of it in both ways. As a teacher now, or possibly in the future, something that you may want to enact in some way. So it has two parts, as you can see on the slide. Part A is your rationale, a very succinct rationale, where you will reiterate what your focus area is. So it's building on assessment task 1. It's still to do with that specific focus area and your research question. So to start with, very briefly, you would reiterate your focus area, its significance to you, and how your teaching journey has shaped your understanding around this chosen focus. So to do this, you would, well, actually, before I go into that, I'll talk about part B. So part A is the rationale. Part B will include a brief written overview of the why and how of your action plan, and then the actual action plan. So 2 parts. So going back to part A, the rationale, 1,250 words, and this one is including references. So you will need to be very succinct. It suggests in the overview, the task overview, that you use 3 subheadings. And again, there is a word count breakdown, which is provided to guide you. And I would say, well, 99% of you in your first assessment task followed that breakdown of the word count, and it seemed to be very helpful for you in terms of keeping to that word limit. So the first section of part A involves reflecting on where you have come from. So it's termed your life history. So you need to think about the elements that have shaped your professional understandings and significance of that focus area. So things like your age, possibly your gender, your culture, and also your educational experience, so educational background. The second section, it asks you to reflect on your professional history. So what led you to the teaching profession, or even possibly to your study of teaching if you haven't quite got there yet, your current working life, or possible future working life when you do become a teacher, what you might imagine that would be, your teaching context, if that is applicable, your teaching role or possible roles, and the age group that you're working in or might like to work in. And then again, you need to consider how this professional history has shaped your evolving pedagogical beliefs and approaches to curriculum. So specifically relating to your chosen focus and research question. So always coming back to that focus and research question. So the third section in part A, this is around your personal understandings of practice, your emerging teaching goals, and future ambitions, again, around that focus area. So it suggests in the task sheet that you focus here on 3 key areas that have come out of the analysis of your scholarly research and the curriculum documents in the first assessment task. So looking at what your findings were and what those implications were for practice. And this is where you would be really thinking about those personal implications that we asked you to talk about. All right, so that's basically the part A, your rationale. So your rationale will then lead into your action plan. So this will involve thinking about your chosen focus and developing a plan of action to move forward in implementing some of the implications that you put forward in your essay. Again, headings are suggested to guide you. The first heading is context, and as it says on the task sheet, it asks for a description of the educational context you are currently teaching in or plan to teach in. The age group, the type of setting, so community-based setting, or it might be a private school or an independent school. So this needs to be very brief and succinct. It also states on the task sheet that it must be in the birth to 8 years. So I've thought about this and I've actually discussed it with some of my colleagues because I do really want this to be authentic and something that you can actually implement. So if you're currently teaching in, for example, upper primary or secondary, I'm happy for you to use this context. But you really do need to draw on early childhood research and also the principles and approaches that you outlined in your essay. So you still need to focus on those pedagogical and curriculum practices to meet the unit outcomes. But again, I want this to be authentic. So if this specifically relates to you, so if you are currently teaching in upper primary or secondary, I really suggest to you that you contact me to discuss how you might move forward with this. So I do suggest that you email me and we'll have a chat about that. So the second heading, this is issue and key concepts. So the implications that you will need to action. So this is where it's the aims of your plan and why you've actually chosen these actions. So it's just a bit of an overview of the reasons behind your action plan. So this is where you need to reference these understandings. And this is also where you need to evidence your engagement with relevant unit readings and also with the weekly discussion as well. And this week is definitely the week where this is very relevant. So everything that we've discussed tonight, all of the readings in this week, this is something that you will be able to use and reference in your assessment task too. So finally, your action plan. This is a physical plan. So there is an example template on Blackboard that you can use, or you can develop your own. Now, for those of you who complete professional development plans in your teaching settings, you're welcome to expand on these as long as it includes the dot points on the template. I've got those on the slide. It includes time frame focus and rationale, so like the specific developmental goals around your focus area, links to curriculum and pedagogy, so it could be specific outcomes that you're linking to. If you are in upper primary, then you would be linking to a CARA, but you might also be linking to age-appropriate pedagogies. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, that would probably be relevant in your setting. And as I said before, if it's applicable, you would also be referring to the Australian Professional Standards in terms of those goals as well. So the activities, this would be specific tasks and actions to develop your capabilities and your understandings. And then resources, of course, you know, colleagues, students, particular research that you might be looking at, government websites, government documents that might help you, particular seminars. Some of you have mentioned that your school sends you out on particular workshops or things that are relevant to that context. You may be able to actually use that as part of your action plan as well if it's relevant to your focus area. So the last one is critical thinking strategies and limitations. So we've touched on this in this session. This is where, again, you would refer to this week's readings and beyond if you wish as well. But we really do need to see a definite engagement in the unit readings that are both in our unit readings and also in your weekly learning guides as well. So you would refer to those. So this particular task, it will require very deep and critical thinking around professional development. As it says on the slide, acknowledging the importance of critical reflection to enhance your thinking and support ongoing learning. We talked about this evening. Evidence of critical engagement in unit readings, as I said. The importance of thinking with and about theory. Again, things that you will be able to get out of the unit readings and to reference these readings as well. Thinking about those important theories that have shaped your perspectives or challenged you or inspired you in terms of your focus, because as we said, this focus area should be something that you're interested in. So why are you interested in it? What is it that has made you want to focus on this particular topic? Are there some specific theories behind this that have caught your interest? So the good news, I guess, is that many of your references are actually going to be the same as in your first assessment task. But of course, you will need to refer to additional empirical research and seminal research around professional development and also around critical reflection, which you will find in the unit readings. So, now, a reminder, as in your first assessment task, that all of your research at a master's level, not just at a master's level, but as an undergraduate level as well, it needs to be scholarly, so recent, except if it's seminal, published, peer-reviewed research articles. So these are the ones that you will find on the QUT databases and also in your unit readings as well. So not websites, not YouTube clips, not PhD dissertations. It's not really acceptable at a master's level or, as I said, generally as an undergraduate level as well. So really focusing on that scholarly research. So an overview, it's due on Friday, May the 29th at 11:59. 2,500 words, including references. So your action plan table is included in that word count. So I would advise you to use dot points and short phrases in that table, just so that you know you don't go over the word count. You do have that 10% though weighs 50%. So, you know, if you didn't do so well in your first assessment task, you do have the opportunity to up that grade in this one. I cannot stress enough that it needs to be concise. It needs to be succinct. And also in terms of your similarity report, if you just reiterate verbatim what you have done in your previous assessment, obviously that's going to come up really high in your similarity report. So what you need to do is you need to cite your first assignment. So this would be, for example, you know, Edwards 2019 EAN 601 assessment task 2 QUT Brisbane. So something like that, but you would actually, you know, you would cite specific areas of your first assessment task as necessary. So we've got 3 examples of past student work. They're all different and they're there to provide insight, inspiration and some clarification. You know, looking at some of them, I think the first one, that first section is excellent, really concise. I think she goes on then to, she's got her overview of her action plan, and then she's got a table, but then she's got idea webs. So lots and lots of idea webs, which are, you know, it's good if you wanted to have your action plan in that way. But looking at it, I would say she was well over the word limit. So just be really careful about that. You can use your creativity in terms of the kind of template, but just make sure that it does have all of those dot points in there that we mentioned on the last slide. Very important, check SiteRight for referencing, and if you do need support from the student support group for your academic writing or your database searching, then I would definitely advise that you look at that. Some of the assessments I probably marked 80% of them now, and some of them were really, you know, lacking that accuracy with APA, and at a master's level that is really important. So not just your reference list but your in-text referencing as well. So I've given you, if you did have some issues with that, I've given you some feedback and also encourage you to go off and have a look at SiteRight to make sure that you are up to speed with that. All right, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell for assessment task 2. Now is your opportunity to ask me some questions.
Excuse me, Angela.
Yeah.
For the second part, for the part B,
Mm-hmm.
does it mean that in my case, for example, that I have to focus on the audience that I would consider, for example, maybe back home where I teach? So
that would be your context. Yep. So back home where you teach, that would be your context. So you would say, yep, a short description of where you are teaching now. You can mention the age group, the type of setting, and the context. So is it, what kind of setting is it? Is it a childcare centre or is it early primary?
It's a primary. It's early primary.
So you would state that. So very, very briefly, that's all you need to do. State that that's what it is. So then you would go in a brief overview of the issue and your issue and its relevance to curriculum and pedagogy, like so stating the aim of your professional development plan. So over viewing what the implications were and what you're actually going to do in terms of your action plan. So how you're going to develop your skills and your understandings further in that area.
Does it mean that I have to go back to my first assignment's question to address this professional development?
Yes,
plan?
definitely. So, as I said, it is the basis of it is your focus for your first assignment. So they just run straight into each other.
Yeah, so that means I have to build on my first assignment's question, and based on that, so I have to make a professional development action plan.
Yes.
Using that pedagogy or the strategy in the setting that I would be teaching.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So, and then I can describe or plan out some activities in order to implement that theory or practice.
So it would be, you would possibly think about some goals for yourself around, so remember I said like look at maybe 3 areas to focus on to implement in terms of your own professional development. So it's not just about what you're going to do in your classroom, it's about how you are going to improve your understandings and your skills so that you can then make changes in your classroom. So it's a professional action plan for you about your professional development.
Thank you.
Yep, so of course that's going to include some of the things that we talked about tonight, like reflecting critically, attending professional development, working collaboratively with your colleagues, all of those sorts of things. You know, we talked about journal writing, talked about all sorts of things. Okay, more questions? That was an excellent one, thank you. Anyone else? I cannot believe that you don't have any questions. Not one question. Okay. So, some of you may not have actually thought about it yet. That's just understandable. So, it's a lot to take in. I want you to think about everything that I've gone through, and this is being recorded, so you can go back over it and listen to it again and have a really good look at the task sheet. So it's nothing else that you want to ask me at this point? All right, so maybe next week, when you've had another look at the task sheet, you may have something specific that you want to ask me, or you can email me as well. Now, I've put on Blackboard, I found a recording that was recorded in last year by the previous lecturer, answering some questions that some of the students asked, and I actually thought they were really good questions, and she answered them very effectively. So I put that recording up there for you to have a look at as well. But please do not hesitate to contact me, and especially if you are currently working in upper primary or secondary, you will need to contact me so that we can work out how you're going to move forward. Now, as with slides from the Zoom sessions from previous sessions, I put the references up there. So these are all references that you can refer to in your assessment task. So there's lots of them there. They're all about professional development, critical reflection. So these are all empirical research that would be very relevant to your assessment task too. So I've kind of done all the hard work for you already, haven't I? You're welcome. Okay then. So I'm going to, I hesitate in turning off the recording, because often what happens is I say, okay, I'm going to turn off the recording, and then you all ask me these amazing questions that other people probably would have liked to have heard as well that aren't here. So this is the last opportunity. Are there any questions that you would like to ask?
Yes, I've got a question, Andrew.
Okay.
I was looking at the Part B Professional Development Action Plan.
Yep.
So the 3 goals that we're going to need to improve, which we have to develop
Yep.
from the discussions we've had, is it going to link with our major question that we addressed in the previous assignment, or is this from purely on our professional development, or does it link with the question that we had in the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything in this second assignment links with your focus area. It's all about your focus area. And so how, you know, your focus area, if it's, for example, about play-based, using play-based approaches in your classroom, then you will be looking at how you're going to develop that. You might need to go and do professional practice. You might need to collaborate with your colleagues to, you know, to develop those skills, those sorts of things. So you need to look at all of the suggestions, all of the implications that you discussed, and what you're going to have to do in your learning environment to make those happen. So there are things that you will need to do before you can do that. You're going to have to do professional development. You might have to do more research. You might have to work with your colleagues, with your principal, with your director, to actually make sure that you can implement these changes or these approaches in your learning environment. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Probably as I'm going through it will sort of be much clearer. Because yes, like you mentioned, my question was, how does play-based learning approaches support early years literacy development?
Mm-hmm.
That question will then be put in place in a form of an action plan, right?
Pretty
As
much.
in how will I sort of engage that play-based learning into more like a reflective practice?
Yeah.
Something like
So
that.
this is something I think, especially for a lot of our international students who are here to learn about how they can implement these approaches into their environments back at home. This is the opportunity for you to work out how you're going to do that.
Okay, thank you.
So it's very practical. As I said, it's an authentic assessment task that I want you to actually be able to action in your learning environment. It's not something that you're just going to do and throw away. That's why I want to work with you to try and make it as authentic as possible. But you need to refer back to pedagogical practices. You need to refer back to the analysis that you did in your essay.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Good question. Anyone else?
It's Meg.
Hi, Meg.
It's sort of a question, but it's more of a clarification. So with the plan, so mine was around critical reflection. So I'll be critically reflecting on critical reflection.
Great. But you would be using a lot of these references. You know, some of them you may have already used in your assessment.
I've seen some of those people, but are different, different articles. So, for example, I don't know exactly what I'm going to go forward with yet, but to get a bit of a gist, so I could choose something like, I want to know more about this theorist and how that could fit in with my service.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just for me, or could I do something about being collaborative and think of ways that I can introduce this to people to be able to work together?
Bingo. Definitely. That's great. That's the kind of thinking I want. I want you to think collaboratively. I want you to think about what you have learned from that assessment task and bring it back to your environment. I want you to think about, you know, inquiry-based learning in terms of, you know, you're going back into your service, into your classroom, and you want to implement some of these things that you've learnt. Some of this you've critically reflected on literature, you've looked at all of the curriculum documents. Now what are you going to do? How are these changes going to be enacted in your teaching and learning environment?
Okay.
Collaboratively. It has to be collaboratively, you know, because it's not going to happen otherwise. You need to get people excited and engaged as well. So how are you going to do that?
Part of that could be some questions that you would pose to them, and
yeah, that could be good. Yeah,
possibly. Okay, anyway, I'll think about it some more, but thank you.
That's okay. Like, as with the first assessment task, run them by me. You know, think about some areas that you might want to use. Have a look at the examples. As I said, they're 3 very different examples. Look at some of the things that they did. Some of them don't actually have goals, but I like goals, especially if you want to tailor your specific professional development. So if you want to go in and I want to see some specific goals that match up with the learning outcomes, match up with the professional standards that you will then seek out. I want you to think about how you're going to continue your learning. I want you to emphasize the importance of ongoing learning, and that you will, you know, this is the beginning. You want to find out more. So how are you going to do that? Some great questions. Anything else? Okay, so I'm going to turn off the recording. And those of you at home, please email me if you have any questions, or you needed some more clarification. I am more than happy to assist you there. Okay, good night, everyone.